So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end, the period Shiahu the prophet. Then we find the 61st chapter, where then the cities of the Messiah, laid waste for many centuries, are returning. And also the time of reduction from 7032 or 2032. Then this time of a transition from the time of the seat ended in 2009, and then we are during the time of the restoration and the time of the precision of the dragon from the Chinese. We must then establish step-by-step formation. Why then requires in our nation a department of taxation and freighting. It is extremely important because the very near future requires then volume, then earnings and volume working at the same time. So then nations, they have to obligate themselves of generating work and volume so then they can earn. Thus then taxation via freighting. The more people purchase, the more taxes. However, since the online purchasing is not yet regulated, and the danger of financial institutions with a closed circuitry, then understanding the fact that at any moment China could release their software and people could download on their computers, then requires our country then to start sober themselves up from 1,000 years of a drunk deceit and to start thinking soberly, understanding that the system of America no longer works. These then requires an understanding of the Chinese system and their trade and their market. If you do trade with China, you often hear, let's do direct trade. This means they already know that their system in the future then is coming. So then, a department of taxation and freighting, the main objective then, obviously, is the upgrade or the update over the entire taxation system in our country. But then, not only related with the funding, transfer of funding, but then individuals, and then internet sales, or then internet trade. That's where most of the volume in the near future is coming from. Because if you then do a search, you find there are lots of purchases done via online from overseas, and also in this country, purchasing from overseas, where then taxation is not gathered. The government then has a huge lack of taxes because they are not doing their job. But then they have to compensate their lack of competency by printing out more money, but it goes so far. And this so far is very nearly coming. So this department then, taxation and freighting, must combine the taxation that you know of, plus the lining up with the freighters and their tracking system, and finding a way of taxing products. These then, either dealers or the stores or factories or the individuals, because as we understand in the near future, the government won't be able, listen to this, it's very important, the government won't be able then to pinpoint who is a factory, who is an individual. Because as you know, you can do trade via online, and you can have your factory at any name you want. You can get funding and linked up with a bank, and you can purchase overseas. The government doesn't know. So let's say if a person would have to be registered, then why would a person be registered in the first time? Because a person can do the work at home. You can have your own web page, you can start purchasing from overseas, and you don't pay tax. So how the government is going to make a determination later when the Chinese system becomes then available for every person? How is the government going to maintain a record of it? There won't be able. However, there is a reference point of both of them. Either factory, either dealers, or then shops. As they purchase either bulk or then as individual, both of them are taxed at the same time. So then the Department of Taxation and Freighting then takes care of this area in terms of then understanding what it takes to get taxation, then dealers being taxed at the first time, and when the product is sold, or the product or products then are sold, then a second time taxed. Because there is a problem. When a person is purchasing from home, they don't have to pay sometimes people, they don't have to pay taxes, they don't have to pay benefits. Sometimes they get products for very cheap. They don't pay tax the first time, but then they pay tax a second time. But let's say then a person gets the product for very cheap, never pay tax. The second time when the product is sold, then a person can pay, for instance, 8 or 10%. By this time, the 10% is already compensated, wherein when you compare the initial price versus what it was sold for, there is a huge discrepancy. So as the government then establishes a system where then either an individual, a dealer, or a shop, or department stores, every time they purchase a product, or a section of products, or then a container of products, then they must be taxed instantly. This provides then a steady income for the government where they can maintain a budget. Then when the product is turned around and resold as a retail value, then another time taxes. So then it is more than enough for a dealer of having 90% of the product. But then if the government doesn't move, the government doesn't have initiation, they don't have the drive. As if they drag themselves around. As the volume then increases, and then the retail, they are already complaining because they don't have enough people buying. Of course, they are buying online. But then what they are buying, they are not paying taxes. You can get online, for instance, some of the sites, they don't even charge you tax for. You buy a product from overseas, you pay only the value of the product, you don't pay tax. And then the products get then resold and no tax again. So how can a country then maintain itself? So this Department of Taxation and Freighting would combine the regular taxation as we know of, but then making dealers, factories, and individuals as individuals. Obviously, the rate or then the price paid would not be the same. If a factory purchases in bulk, they would get a price. If an individual then buys, it would get another price. But in each case, then they are taxed and then they are leveled. So then when the Chinese system becomes available, then our government at least has a system and a department of taxation and freighting, where then the freighters of our country then report via the tracking. So then the government can take taxes from. Because it's not only enough of having, for instance, a person registered, but an unregistered person can purchase products and not pay tax. So what's the plan of the government? Is it important having a new transportation CEO or transportation minister of some sort? No, it is very unwise at the moment. Yes, a person should be nominated, but it's not the focus of the entire understanding. Yet those departments are not for profit. And we are neglecting a profitable area where then taxation and freighting must go hand in hand. So why are we not doing this yet?